This is TWiT.
Well, let's take some time and talk about what you do here with Bito, which, like you said, launched in December 2022. It's all about AI and coding and kind of assistive coding, code generation. Tell us a little bit about kind of Bito's approach and process and the data set and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So we started kind of working on this last year, and we were starting to use AI to help it kind of explain code and understand code. And we were kind of messing around with a lot of the large language models, and then GPT 3.5 shipped, and we were kind of thought, this isn't like a little dot release. It's not like an incremental upgrade. It's really a massive shift up in the capabilities. And so we kind of quickly pushed with our engineering team to launch Bito in, like I mentioned, December of 2022. And today we have over 100,000 developers actively using the product, which has been pretty exciting.
Nice.
So and they're all over the world, and they're using it, like we just announced kind of yesterday some analysis of like how people are using it. 21% of the time they're using it to explain code. 20% of the time they're using it to like write and refactor code. 16% of the time they're using it to debug code and sort of clean up their code. But they're using it for all kinds of testing, to try to learn things, like asking questions. Hey, what's the command for that in S3? To create an S3 bucket. What's the git rebase command? We just had somebody put a YouTube video up where they built a whole app, a to-do app in about 6 minutes with APIs, and they were testing it on Postman, and it was pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Like our developers actually, we have lots to do, so I don't want to make it sound like we're amazing, but by any stretch, we surveyed our developers and we asked them how much more productive is this making you, and they said it's making them 31% more productive. And we have developers at about 40% of the NASDAQ 100 using it. So Microsoft, Airbnb, Tesla, NVIDIA, Google engineers from all these places using it. So if we take a step back, I think we really believe that over the next 5 years, there's going to be a massive kind of change and unlock in how developers work and the productivity gains that they're going to see. And I think the amount of, if you go back to like Mark Andreessen's, essay from 2011, where he said software is eating the world, I would say we haven't really seen anything yet. I think that the amount of software that's going to be produced in the next 10 years is going to make the last 10 years look like a joke, because
why exactly, I want to ask, why exactly do you think that? Is that because the tools and the support that systems like Bito and these kind of like very dynamic AI, AI like validating code and creating code and providing that assistance, that helps create more software? Is that why?
Yeah, I think it's kind of on all dimensions, right? I think you have. So one of the things that we talked about yesterday in this announcement we had was that 40% of the developers who are using the tools have more than 5 years of experience. And so, because a lot of people think it's like only for junior developers.
Totally, right.
But the point, the flip side of that is 60% of them have less than 5 years of experience, right? And we're seeing a lot of developers who are like 1 year of experience or not really a professional developer, and they're like, hey, this is really helpful. My 9-year-old, who's not yet a professional developer, he was like, hey, I kind of got interested in coding. And he said, Bito, I want to make this extension, a Chrome extension that, I give you a product name, it pulls back a list of products from eBay, ranks them by price, and displays that as a pop-up, as a Chrome extension. And it wrote all the code to do that. And he just followed the instructions.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and it totally worked. And then he was like, hey, I don't like the UI. Can you, center the headline, make it bolder, make it bigger, whatever. And then it rewrote it and loaded that up and it worked. And, that's not necessarily like what a professional developer is doing. But even if you were a professional developer, how long would that take you? It would still take you like 1 or 2 hours. And you're like, what's the right way to call the eBay API? And like, how, I got to get a key and this and that. He did it in like 3 minutes, And so, to where, we're seeing, I'll give you like, we had a large, kind of transportation company say, hey, we have all these .NET applications. Nobody really knows exactly what they do. We need to document them. Can you help us do that? And we used Bito to write a script that calls Bito and iterated through hundreds of code files and immediately documented them,
Wow.
And so, if you just think about like, okay, well, that would have maybe cost them $100,000 of hiring people and to try to go back and look through all the code and document it, or maybe they just never upgrade them and assess, add those tech debt.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're like, hey, they're all documented in 4 minutes, And so I think that whether you're a new developer and it's helping accelerate you, or whether you're an experienced developer and it's helping get rid of a bunch of the drudgery of like, writing test cases or documenting code, and lets you spend more time on the important stuff and how do I get to design the system to scale over time and whatnot. I mean, we think that it kind of helps everybody.
Yeah. I think that's the important takeaway for me is, and I think time and time again, this is more and more become kind of my outlook on these AI assisted tools is that, it's easy to look at them and say, oh, but wait a minute, you're replacing the developer with the system. And my perspective has just become, no, it's not a matter of replacement. It's a matter of shifting the level of kind of like reliance upon the developer for everything. Yes. Onto a system that is smart enough to either make it easier for the developer to do what they're doing, or to free up that developer to do other really important things that maybe weren't available if they were spending their time doing these things that the AI is trained to do very quickly. Like a seasoned developer, might hear your story about your son creating this app in 3 minutes and respond with, well, then why am I doing what I'm doing? Where is this going? And I don't necessarily, I guess I'm not a developer, so maybe I'm not in the right position to say it, but I don't necessarily see that as a replacement. I see that as a game changer from the perspective of, oh, so you mean now instead of starting from scratch, I can start from this point and work from there to create something bigger, better, obviously faster. I mean, that sounds like that's really the point.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I really think that it enables humans to kind of realize their full potential, right? I mean, it's like, let you kind of do the things that you do best and let, the kind of semantics of like, how did I type this command right? Or, is this, handles all those things for you. I mean, if you kind of step back and you look at just like the arc of time, like that's kind of what human progress is, right? It's like you're using technology in some way to kind of automate some certain parts or enable uses that couldn't happen, before. And sometimes you go through periods where it's just kind of incremental, let's say for the last 30 years, every couple of years, there's a new programming language and somebody says, oh, well, now Java, C++ used to do your own memory management. Then Java came out and said, oh, now you can do your own, it handles memory management for you. I mean, that's like 20 years ago. But the point is everyone's like, oh my God, I don't have to do a garbage collection and figure out how to make sure my machine doesn't run out of memory. Now that's like, and then we had new programming languages and they just kind of kept going and make it easier. And Go was like, more scalable and whatever. But let's go back to the Industrial Revolution. It was like, oh, now we have a steam engine. And that was like the step function change in what it enabled humans to do. And I think that's kind of this is like another one of those moments, if you will, which is like, wow, we can do a lot of things that now we're going to have this arc of productivity, going up at a slightly higher pace for the next, few years.
I think what's really interesting too is, you were talking about the percentage of people who are of let's say, less experienced developers, budding developers who use a tool like this as a way to kind of maybe understand at a faster rate. I think what's interesting to me is as tools like these develop and mature along with that kind of generation of learning developers, it's going to be really interesting to see how that shapes the career of development, if this is kind of just part of the playing field. Right now, it feels very new. Right now, there's I'm sure there are a lot of developers who are tenuous about it and like a little apprehensive and everything like that. But then you've got the group of developers who are learning alongside these tools. And that's going to broaden out kind of their understanding of what it means to be a developer. What does that lead to 10 years down the line or even further?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a story to tell you here because I think it'll draw together like 3 or 4 things we've been talking about in a funny way. So I'm going to give a little plug to, there's this guy who startup called Get Synchronicity, and they launched, they put a tweet out and went viral a few weeks ago. So they use AI. They took an interview between Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg, and they translated it to Hindi, from English to Hindi. They synced it into the voices of Lex Friedman and Mark Zuckerberg. And then they used image recognition technology to change their lips to match the voice. So you can actually go watch this. It's on Twitter or whatever. And it looks like Lex Friedman is interviewing Mark Zuckerberg in their own voices in Hindi. It's kind of crazy. So of course my 9-year-old is like, I want to do that. Let's make this app this weekend, Dad. And I'm like, that's not that easy. And he's like, he's fearless. He's like, he doesn't care. So we climb into Bito, so actually, again, this 9-year-old was able to take a random video, and he was able to, sorry, my computer's just going nuts here. He was able to convert the English language into French. And then we got a little bit stuck, but he had, Bito, and he was also using Anthropic. There were some of their models, and they were helping do it. And every time we would try to build it, we'd get a bug. I would say, oh, okay, let's look at this line of code. He was like, screw that. He just threw the bug into the AI model and was like, rewrite the code. Yeah, like fix it, man. Why'd you make a mistake?
This is wrong.
Yeah, and it actually kind of like made me step back, and I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, and again, it kind of goes back to like, he's like an AI native. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
He's kind of, we talk about these kids who grew up with cell phones.
Yep.
Like he's like, just kind of, it's going to be like a third arm for him. Yep. Whereas I think we're all kind of like, okay, what should I do? How do I use
fit
this?
it in? We're like, how do we fit it in? They're like, there's no fitting in. This is just the way it is. Let's go.
Exactly. We're like, it's a little bar in our computer. He's like, it's the whole computer. Like, what are you talking about? So I mean, I think you're totally right, which is that there's going to be a whole kind of adoption curve, and like we're going to see how younger people adopt these tools in ways that, like, old people like myself maybe like, are slower to handle and manage.
Yeah. But what's cool about your dynamic with your son is like you're the one creating the tool that he's using, and he's actually teaching you what's cool about the tool you created. That's
he made me pay him. He looks for bugs, and I have to pay him $100 a bug that he finds.
There you go. Right on. Love it. Absolutely love it. I want to respect your time. I know we've already I wrote that, I thought about so many questions, and I realized once we started talking,
we got a couple more minutes if you want to go, but no worries if you got to run.
No. I wanted to respect your time. If you have a little bit more time, then that's fantastic.
Let's do it. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the hurdles that you've seen in getting these systems to produce code with maximum integrity? Because I think, a lot of people, if they are naysayers, if they are doubtful, it's because, we hear about the hallucinations and how that impacts all these different things with AI systems. I'm sure code is no less. Like you can't 100% just buy in and say this code is without fault because it came out of the AI system. Like what are some of those hurdles? What are you faced with running Bito and recognizing that reality?
Yeah. So two thoughts there. I think one is that, so one of the things that we've done is that we actually index all of your current code. So that actually provides an incredible sort of template, if you will, to the models to, like, they're trying to mimic that code that's already there. And so that actually helps, I think, constrain them, quite a bit, and helps kind of provide some guardrails. I'm not trying to say they never hallucinate or anything like that, but I think it's, one of those things that definitely helps and advances it. I think the other thing I would say is that code is really interesting because you can test it on the other end, right? You can write a test case. To say, hey, is it working properly? And so I think that there's some kind of not. There's some self-regulation that can kind of happen there. So again, you have to write those test cases, and you can use, Bito or whatever. You can use like AI to do that. But I think that that's something, a benefit that we have that maybe like, just using it, ChatGPT is like an encyclopedia, isn't the same way, where you're not exactly sure what that answer is. But I think like those are real issues, and I think we're looking at techniques like multi-pass, like you provide a prompt multiple times, and you kind of look at what's the output, and then like say like can you assess the confidence level? I mean, there are some open source projects where people have said, hey, we got hallucinations down from like 20% to 1% by kind of following a set of processes and whatnot. So I think those are all things that we're looking to incorporate into our tools over time.
And then how with Bito is this is this embedded in the developer environment, depending on what environment you're using, of course?
Yeah.
And how do you feel about and at some point these environments are probably going to have this stuff baked in at the core, right? Like at the foundation of, especially if, as we were talking about earlier, the native AI developers or developers assisted by AI, if that becomes like a native stance or a native perspective, those users, those developers are going to expect these kind of tools to be natively, integrated into the things that they're doing and the things that they're using.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Like going back to what we were talking about platforms, right? Like some of the IDEs are starting to say, hey, we're going to build in AI into the IDE. And now you have So IDE is an integrated development environment. That's the tool, the main tool that developers use to that they live in on a daily basis to, whether it's write code or, maybe test code or debug their code, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of two major IDE families that we work with, Visual Studio Code and the JetBrains IDEs. They make kind of one IDE per language. So we work with those two things. And then we also work with Vim, which is a really old school one. And then we actually have a CLI. So you can run it from the terminal, and we find a lot of users doing that for automation stuff. So anyway, so we work kind of across a bunch of different platforms. I think there's even some IDEs that are coming up that are kind of saying, hey, we're AI native.
Right.
There's one called Cursor that sort of says, hey, we have like AI kind of built into it. And I think that, typically, like when you've had like these paradigm shifts in technology, you'll see some of them adapt, some of the incumbent kind of platforms adapt well, but then you'll also often see like a real rise of new things because somebody kind of reimagined that experience or that focus on it, allowed them to kind of do something, significantly better or different. So, I think, look, it's early days and it's kind of hard to know how it all plays out. But I think we kind of feel like if we're really looking holistically at the developer lifecycle and experience, things that they do on a regular basis, that we can like really help them optimize that experience quite a bit. Versus kind of like shoehorning it into like a way that IDE looks like.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. And then finally, before we kind of wrap things up, I do have to mention the news that we alluded to earlier. So I'm happy that we kind of stretched this a little bit. Meta this morning launched Code Llama, which is entirely in your wheelhouse with Bito.
Yeah.
It's basically what we're talking about here. What did you think of the news? How does this impact what you guys are working on, what you're doing?
Yeah, I had a call an hour and a half ago with my CTO, and we were like, we got to start testing this thing out and check it out. And could we use it for this thing or that thing? And, it's going to improve security quite a bit. So, I think that, look, I think every day, not every day, but every week at this point, there's some explosion of new capabilities, and it's really exciting. And I think what they're doing there is pretty cool.
Yeah, indeed. Well, everybody should definitely check into that. That is news that you will find this afternoon, Thursday, August 24th. Amar Goel, really appreciate you taking time to talk with us about Bito, about developing with AI, even sharing some of your thoughts about some of the big news stories of the week. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Great to connect with you too.
Absolutely. So if people want to check in on what y'all are doing with Bito, find out more information about it, start using it themselves, where do you want to point them to?
Bito.ai. Bito.ai. Please come check it out. Join our community, and love to hear what we're doing all right and where we can improve. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, best of luck on the development of this as things get crazier and crazier in this AI world we're living in right now. Thank you so much for taking time to hang out with me today. I really appreciate it.